Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura's Handmade Haven. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so glad you joined me today. I have another quick, fun, beginner-friendly project for you, and we are going to organize some crayons for those little kiddos or yourself when you're on the go. So let's head on over to the craft table. I'll walk you through the fabric requirements, and then we'll head right over to the sewing machine to sew up our project. Now you can definitely make this project out of complementary fabrics, or you can make it out of one fabric. Depending on what you decide is going to determine how wide you cut your fabric right now. I am going to make it just out of one fabric, simple and easy. Your crayons will measure 3.5 inches if you get like the normal crayons, and I am using like the original classic crayon style. If you have the bigger crayons that you sometimes see for smaller children, then you will have to adjust some of the sizes I'm telling you. But like I said, for the original regular type of crayons, they're 3.5 inches long. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut our strip of fabric for the entire width of fabric. And we want this to be able to be double-sided, and we also want to have enough to fold up a pocket and enough to fold down a little flap so none of those crayons go crazy and fall out when we're toting them around. My stepdaughter tells me that I am crazy when it comes to math, that there are a lot of things that I just do in my head and she can't follow sometimes. So let me walk you through how I'm going to figure out how wide to cut my fabric. So my crayon is 3.5 inches long. So I know that I need at least 3.5 inches, but I don't want my fabric to come all the way up on that crayon because I want to be able to pull it out of the pocket really easily. So I'm going to say I want a 2-inch pocket. And then I want to add a little bit to this because I don't want them so tight in there that they're all the way to the top and bottom. So I'm going to say it's 4 inches. So this is behind the crayon. So that's the base basically. And then I also want a flap from the top to fold back down. And I'm going to say I want it to be 3 inches. Because that way, if you think about your roll, your crayon roll, you'll have a 2-inch pocket, and then you'll have all your little crayons standing up here. And then you'll have another flap that comes down that goes right about to here, and that will keep everybody safe and secure inside. So if I say this is just one flat little piece, then that is 2 plus 4 plus 3 is 6 is 9. Added my seam allowance of 1/2 inch, so that's 9.5. And I'm just going to straighten up this edge of my fabric because it is really wonky. And the next thing I'm going to do is cut off the selvage because I don't want to have to deal with that later. And you're going to be amazed how quick this comes together. 2 other items you're going to want to grab. You're going to grab yourself a little bit of interfacing and a little bit of ribbon. Now we want to cut our interfacing at 9.5, and we're at the 2-inch mark, so we're going to just move on over to the 11.5-inch mark here. But interfacing is just going to give it a little more stability when we're sewing it together and when our crayons are in it. Okay, at the sewing machine, all you're going to do is you're going to take your width of fabric, which is 9.5 by width of fabric, and you're going to turn it right sides together. Then you're going to take that piece of interfacing and you're going to layer it on top. Let me press this real quick. All right, this is pressed, and then I'm going to put my interfacing on top. I'm just going to kind of center it, really. It doesn't have to be all the way to each end, but close would be nice. And it won't be because the interfacing is only 20 inches wide, and then we're just going to run a 1/4-inch seam all the way around 3 sides, but we're going to leave an opening on one side. No, those aren't completely straight, but they'll be okay. Now, before you go crazy, just remember that this last side, you need to give yourself probably a 3 to 4-inch opening. So I'm going to stop right here and back stitch. Let's snip this string, and then we're also going to clip our corners. So when we turn it out, it is nice and sharp on the points. Then we're just going to grab everything and turn it right side out. We'll use our 2-point turner to make sure our corners are nice and sharp. Slipping the 2-point turner into the inside of the soon-to-be Crayola roll-up. We're just going to work those out to the corners. Flipping this around. And then once we get these corners pushed out, we'll take it back over to the ironing table and give it a good little press. We're going to run a top stitch right around the edge with the opening. Let's make sure these edges are actually lining up really well. I'm a little crazy with my pressing apparently. It happens. Just adjust and keep going. Now remember, we want to do a 2-inch fold up to hold our crayons. Now I'm going to cut probably about an 18-inch length of ribbon. It's not the full amount of ribbon, not the full length, but we need some ribbon so our roll-up will tie shut. We're going to measure up from the bottom about 3.5 inches. Because remember, we're going to flip the bottom where we just did the top stitch. We're going to flip it up 2 inches, and our crayons are 3.5 inches. So that will give us 1.5 inches. So that's about the middle, especially when you consider the width of the ribbon. So we are going to sew this into place, but not the entire length. We're just going to sew it the first about 2 or 3, probably 3 inches from the edge, just to make sure it's secure and that they will be able to use it and reuse it. But not so much that they won't be able to tie it when it's rolled up. And I'm just going to go ahead and do kind of like a box stitch all the way around this ribbon, just because I'm using white thread. So I want it to, look planned, I guess is what I'll say. I'm just using the white threads because it shows up really well on camera. If I was doing this for real, then I would probably just use a complementary thread Now I'm going to use my ruler again and measure up 2 inches, or maybe 2.25. 2.25 looks really good. Now be careful with your ribbon at this point because you don't want to get it caught in a stitch that you're not intending. So just kind of pay attention to where your ribbon is. I'm just going to put a pin in here to hold this end and then move it down to the other end of this pocket. All right, so we're just going to start on this end, and for this one we're going to make sure the ribbon is flat and it's not going anywhere it shouldn't. And we're just going to stitch. Now we're going to go ahead and do a top stitch all the way around this little Crayola roll-up. The part that takes the most time is coming up very soon. This is the easy part. You're just going to run a top stitch all the way around all 4 sides. Again, just making sure that the other tail of your ribbon is not in the way. Now remember, I said that I want this to fold down, and I want to make sure that that's still 3.5 inches between there at least. And this is right at 3 3/4 if I have it right there. So I'm just going to put a pin in this end, and we're going to measure this end and move it down just a smidgen. That is the technical term. And again, I'm just putting a pin in this folded edge. All right, and then we're going to flip this over And we're gonna see if there happens to be a mark on my sewing machine that I could go with, and there is. I'm just gonna keep my finger right here, and I'll know that that is where it should be. This is a cheat for getting a straight line without having to mark it. That's what you're seeing right now. I just did not want to have to mark. All right, now this is the part that takes the longest amount of time. And the reason I did that stitch line is because that way when you fold it down, it's going to bend a little easier there for them when they're going to roll up their crayons. Now, in order to get all of these little pockets made, I am again going to do a little cheat, and I'm going to look on my needle plate and see if there's a place that I can kind of just keep in mind to get my crayon. So what I'm going to do is I used one crayon here, and it's going to be all the way down, and I'm just going to put a pin by it to mark those two spots, and that way I know this crayon will slip in there. You want it to be kind of snug because you don't want them falling out, but you don't want it so snug that they can't get them in the pocket. So when I take this up here, obviously I'm not going to sew until I remove the pins, but I can see on my needle plate there is a line right here. And now I'm going to line that up on the same line, and I'm going to keep progressing over all the way down the strip. And you will definitely have some strings to cut off when you get done. These would make great little stocking stuffers, great little, this honestly would make a great little gift for someone that may be in the nursing home or a rehab center. If they want a little art project to do, and that way they could have all their little crayons to, do their art project with. Be great for travel. These are great in the car because the crayons can just stay in the pockets, and you just pull out the one that you want when you need to use it. And then, it'll lay flat, so if it's across your lap or whatever, it's just going to conform to your leg. Now, when you get to the other end, just pay attention and make sure that you don't sew over your loose tail ribbon. You want to make sure that you're keeping it back out of the way. It's okay to sew over the part that you sewed down. It's just you don't want to sew the tail. Otherwise, you won't be able to use the tail to tie it. And I think I cut it at 18. I probably would cut it at about 24. Just because little fingers may have a little problem, may have problems getting it tied. Now at this point, I just need to see, I need to get that tail going back the other way now, because otherwise I'll be sewing it down in the wrong direction. All right, I have a bunch of little strings to cut, and then I will get my crayons in there and we'll have a wrap up. All right, so this is what we have. We have a cute little crayon roll-up, and all 24 did fit in here. They are all in their cute little pockets. And I actually had a couple extras too, so I don't know if you have other little treasures to stick in there, then you will have those as well. The top folds down, and then you can just roll it up. Bring this around and tie it shut. Now, I did make this ribbon a little shorter than I should have. I cut it at 18 inches thinking that would be plenty. I think that you should probably cut it at least 24, maybe even 30, and I will probably be adding on to this ribbon, and I'll just add on a little piece there. For the meantime, I'll just tack close like that. But anyway, so yeah, make sure you make your ribbon at least 24, maybe even 30 inches long, just so it's easier to roll up. And then just remember that you're only sewing about 3 or 4 inches from that one end and leaving the rest of the tail loose. And that way you can tie it closed when you get it done. But this is a super easy project. Just roll it up, tie it, throw it in your tote bag, and you have all the crayons you need to color a page for yourself or entertain a little one along the way. I hope that you enjoyed this very quick and easy, beginner-friendly sewing project. I hope that you have been inspired, and maybe you have some little kiddos or adults in your life that love to color, and this is something that you could definitely make up for them super quick and easy. Until next time, find joy in all you do, carve out some time for crafting and creating, and remember, it's always better when you make stuff up.